Okay, now on to the meat of the matter, my experience with Chinese medicine. For maybe a decade and a half living in Taiwan, I was very fit and healthy and had nothing other than the most insignificant of health problems. I probably went to see a doctor less than half a dozen times. I remember having verrucas on my feet at one time, an allergy to certain grasses at another, just some things like that. Then one day I went to a doctor about tinnitus, which had been bothering me for some time. He was just a regular GP, but he cleverly advertised his services to give the impression that he was also an ENT specialist. So in this sense, at least, he was a bogus doctor of Western medicine. But that's a little beside the point. In his surgery, like most in Taiwan these days, he had a blood pressure monitor for the use of any patients while I waited. I tried it, not while I waited, but on the way out, after finding the doctor had little useful advice on tinnitus. 180! Exclaimed the receptionist, who was sitting nearby. And the doctor came rushing out of his office. He explained that was very high and prescribed me 3 different blood pressure medications, urging me to take the first tablets right there on the spot. With such a reaction, by the time I left the place, I guess my blood pressure would have been well over 200. But I felt something was not quite right about this, so I went to see another GP for a second opinion, the same one I had seen for my allergy. This doctor, who was nearing retirement and consequently didn't care too much if his peers didn't like his criticisms, lamented that GPs in Taiwan had become nothing more than drug dispensers in recent years, prescribing the maximum amount of medication to each patient that they felt they could get away with. He advised me to take only one kind of blood pressure medication, see how it affected my blood pressure over the next several days, and only switch to one of the remaining 2 if the first had little effect. He pointed out that by taking all 3 I could end up with blood pressure so low that I may be passing out in the street or behind the wheel. He also pointed out that the problem of overprescribing drugs had got much worse with the advent of the National Health Insurance System for all its benefits. Now that people didn't have to pay for their medication, they would rarely object to being given far more medication than they actually needed, and most doctors took advantage of this, he told me. A second ailment struck me only a few weeks later. Over a period of several days, my shoulders seemed to seize up. Movement became increasingly painful, and the range of motion of my shoulders and arms increasingly restricted. Finally, I decided I had to see a doctor about it. This time, I chose one close to my previous place of work. Unlike in the UK, you don't have to register with any particular doctor or clinic in Taiwan. You can register with as many as you like. This doctor took a cursory look at my shoulders and concluded there was nothing wrong with me. Not having any drugs to dispense, he seemed eager to get me out of his office so he could see the next patient. I pointed out that I could now hardly type, and my work depended on that. He suggested I take a shoulder massage or a sauna and see if that helped, and again seemed eager to get rid of me. I told him I had soaked in a hot bath the previous night with little benefit, and insisted that I was in pain and had hardly been able to ride my motorcycle to his surgery. "Oh, I can give you painkillers for it," he told me, getting ready to write out the prescription. And that for me summed up the most serious failing of Western medicine. He could give me painkillers, even for a supposedly non-existent ailment. I took the prescription, but I didn't take the actual painkillers. Instead, I went to find out for myself what was wrong with my shoulders. I went first to an X-ray clinic to have my back and shoulders X-rayed. The discomfort was such that I could not believe there wasn't something seriously wrong with my shoulders, so I got an X-ray at my own expense, vowing that if nothing showed up, I would get a much more expensive CT scan to see if that revealed the problem. I was informed by the X-ray medic that I had scoliosis, the first I knew of it. I took the X-rays back to the doctor, and asked whether he thought this could account for my shoulder pain. No, that's nothing to worry about, he told me. That was only a problem if the curvature was more than 25 degrees. After I got home, I did some research and only then realized why the doctor had told me that only curvatures greater than 25 degrees were treated. The Western medicine approach is to do nothing at all about scoliosis curves less than 25 degrees. 1 to 24 degrees equals no problem at all. Then magically, at 25 degrees or more, it becomes a serious problem, because there are no drugs to treat it. When it reaches more than 25 degrees, you can have it corrected with surgery. This is a major, maximally intrusive operation that involves inserting metal clamps on the spine. It often results in an undeformed spine at the expense of a lifetime of discomfort and reduced range of motion. But that's all that Western medicine has to offer. I decided for the first time in my life to see a doctor of Chinese medicine. I had been told that the standard of medical care varied hugely in Chinese medicine, but remembered one doctor who a neighbour had previously recommended if ever I needed to see a doctor. I went there. For about 15 minutes, this doctor manipulated my spine and shoulders, first in a sitting position, then with the help of his assistant, with me lying on my belly. Finally, his assistant took over and taught me some exercises to help ensure that the problem didn't return. I was also given some advice with posture and diet and some herbal medicine, and that was my treatment for that session. But I was advised that my spine would gradually slip back into the deformed position, so I would need to carry out this treatment at least once a week. I could hardly believe the difference by the time I left the doctor's surgery. My shoulders still felt a little delicate, but the pain had gone and my full range of motion was back. But the biggest difference was something I hadn't bargained for, a bonus health benefit. For more than a decade I had had poor circulation in my right arm, and now, for the first time in years, the blood seemed to be flowing in my right arm in a way I had almost forgotten was once normal. I previously had no idea why. Only my right arm had poor circulation, but I then realized that the thoracic curve in my spine towards my right shoulder had done something to impede blood flow to the arm. All that was needed was to set the spine straight again, and my circulation problem was gone too. And, as if that were not enough, there was yet another health benefit I didn't notice after my first treatment session. At the advice of the retiring MD, 2 days before my second treatment session with the Chinese medicine doctor, I bought my own blood pressure monitor to get a better idea of where my blood pressure was over time. I happened to take my blood pressure just after returning from the second session, when the circulation in my right arm was again optimal, and I discovered that my blood pressure was around 30 points lower than usual, at the high end of normal. The same was the case immediately after my third session. The poor circulation in my right arm had also been a factor in my high blood pressure. Naturally, I continued my treatment with the doctor of Chinese medicine and saw a more consistent improvement over time. If I had taken the Western medicine route, I would have been taking an endless series of painkillers for an unrecognized problem, hardly able to move my shoulders and with the same poor circulation in my right arm making my blood pressure even higher than it need be, waiting, no doubt, until I could get metal clamps fixed to my spine. If that isn't a perfect example of treating the symptoms instead of the root cause, I don't know what is. And yet, apart from the herbal medicine, there wasn't anything exclusive to Chinese medicine about my treatment. A chiropractor and a physiotherapist could have given the same treatment in a Western medicine setting. But chiropractors are generally looked down upon by the drug dispensing community, and this view is reinforced by the militant pseudo-skeptics, as you can see by this Wikipedia page. Wikipedia and how it has fallen victim to manipulation by various special interest groups, including but not limited to the pseudo-skeptics, will be the topic of my next video in this series, unless, of course, Professor Dave responds to this video first. I was intending to talk a little bit more about the sweeping overgeneralizations and gross exaggerations that, quote, Professor, unquote, Dave Farina makes about alternative medicine in his videos, but after researching his various interviews online, I am tempted to conclude that he may not be all he seems. Yeah, he's not a professor. That's not what I mean. I mean this.
Dozens of other topics, including topics I know nothing about, but I hire experts in the field to write me the scripts, and then consultants to look at the scripts and look at the finished animations and make sure it's all good, right? I'm not professing to be an expert, honestly, in any academic field, not even chemistry. But I understand it very well. And then the stuff that I don't understand, I have people who do understand it explain.
These clips lead me to wonder whether Dave Farina is just a frontman in a large and well-organized multiplayer operation. Where would he get the funds to hire all these experts? Well, if Professor Dave Explains is genuinely a one-man operation, it would certainly be interesting to know who his sponsors are. My bet would be the pseudo-skeptic community or some part thereof. But who knows? There are, of course, other entities in the United States well known for using their financial clout to manipulate public opinion.